Discovering the Law. My name is Lucy Rivera and I am the host of this program. This episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Today we have a very special guest. We have Mitch Ross. He's a partner at the prestigious Boston law firm of Sweeter and Ross. Attorney Mitch Ross went to Cornell University and is a graduate of Harvard University Law School. Attorney Mitch Ross is here because he's been practicing law for 45 years, and he's here to tell us about not only the Frank Murray Inn of Court, but also about the American and British Inns of Court. Attorney Mitch Ross is here because he's part of the board of directors of the Frank Murray Inn of Court. Mitch Ross, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know you're one of the past presidents. Chris Carter's immediately preceding you.
That's right.
And then Sam Perkins, so welcome.
Thank you.
What is an Inn of Court?
Well, you have to start with the British Inns of Court, which actually came into existence over 700 years ago, shortly after the Magna Carta, if you can believe that. What happened was, in the royal courts, there were not trained advocates to advance the causes of the royalty, the causes of the nobility before the king in the royal courts. And so the idea came up, let's have an organization that will help trained advocates, which eventually became known as barristers under the English system. They're the ones who you see running into court with the white wigs and arguing cases. And over the years, the Inns of Court in Britain became a combination of what we would have done by bar associations, law schools, and partly fraternities. That is, training lawyers, getting them to work together, and advancing the cause of advocacy. That evolved into four British Inns of Court that now exist. There's Lincoln's Inn, the Inner Temple, the Middle Temple, and Gray's Inn. And every barrister in England, that is, any lawyer who argues cases in the courts, must be a member of the inn. Back in the 70s, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Warren Burger, at the time, had the idea that he'd like to take some of the best aspects of the English system and advance the cause here in the United States of professionalism, of collegiality, of civility, of ethical practice. And so what he did is he started a movement that's now called the American Inns of Court that promotes in various ways programs to do exactly those sorts of things. That is, to help educate lawyers, to let them and other lawyers speak informally and on a very collegial level with each other and with judges, so that across the country there are hundreds of these organizations, consider them clubs, all belonging to the American Inns of Court, that try to advance those goals. That is, to make us more professional, and the like.
Mitch, but what is the difference between the British Inn of Court and the American Inn of Court?
Well, in the British Inn of Court, the Inn of Court is actually the official organization of lawyers who are going to be barristers. Here it's very unofficial. What we have here in the United States is state bars. That is, as a Massachusetts lawyer, I'm a member of the Bar of Massachusetts, of the Supreme Judicial Court. That's my official designation. In order to do that, I went to an accredited law school, even though it was back in the old days. I passed the bar exam, and I kept my credentials in good stead. In England, all of that is handled by the Inns of Court in the main. There's some variations, and nowadays they do have legal education in law schools and the like, but the Inns of Court in England is the core of the system. Here, it's much more an adjunct to the official system. That is, it's an informal way for lawyers to become better at what they do, more collegial with other lawyers, and more civil with themselves and with judges.
Oh, very good. So what is the benefit that you derive from joining the Frank Mary Inn of Court, for instance, or for any lawyer to join an American Inn of Court?
Well, I'll tell you what we do at the Murray Inn of Court, and let me give you a little background. Frank J. Murray was a particularly well-respected judge in both the state court system here in Massachusetts and in the federal court system. And when the Inns of Court started to become popular, a number of people associated with Judge Murray, including some people who had clerked for him, wanted to set up an Inn of Court that would advance those causes and those goals that I've talked about. And they named it after him. What we do in the Murray Inn of Court is really two basic things. First, we meet several times a year, 6 to 8 times a year. We meet for an informal social hour, and then dinner, and then a program of interest to lawyers and judges, so that in recent months, we've met and had, for example, Justice Geraldine Hines, the first black woman judge on the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, come and talk to us about her very inspiring story. We've had programs on interesting cases. For example, we had a program on the defense of Whitey Bulger with both of his lawyers, Jay Carney included, telling us about some of the ins and outs of the defense. We've had the lawyers and the judge handling certain cases. For example, the tobacco case, in which a jury awarded something like $180 million to the plaintiffs, so that the lawyers and the judges hear how these things work. We just last week had a wonderful program on current developments in immigration law, which was of particular interest to a lot of the state court judges who belong to our inn, because when they handle a criminal case dealing with someone who does not have citizenship or a green card, they need to understand the implications of the sentence that they dole out and the way that they handle the case. So that's one thing we do. The second major activity of the inn is that we try to recognize people who have made outstanding contributions to the practice of law here in Massachusetts. Every year, we award an Of the Year award. We pick a Judge of the Year, a Lawyer of the Year, and a Clerk of the Year. That is one of the clerks of court who's so essential to the practice of law. We, last year, awarded our Judge of the Year to a judge who did not receive as much public attention as she should have, Chief Judge Barbara Rouse, who is now retiring, who is head of the Superior Courts, and devoted her career and her life to the advancement of justice in Massachusetts. I don't think the public knew that much about her, but we in the profession look to try to recognize people who are not widely recognized. We recognized a clerk in the Middlesex Court in Lowell named Mike Brennan, who also wouldn't have received that much recognition, but those of us who practice in the courts and the judges who were up in the Lowell session of the Middlesex Superior Court recognized here was someone who makes the practice of law in the courts for both the lawyers and the judges much better, much more professional, and certainly much more pleasant. And we recognized a lawyer named Ed Ryan, who actually had been quite well recognized, but his contributions to the profession were really so exceptional, we wanted to let him know that we really valued his contribution to the profession. From time to time, we've also awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award. We've only done 2 thus far, both to judges who have devoted their entire careers to advancing the cause of justice in Massachusetts and to advance those goals of the inn that we try to advance, to make the practice of law more civil, more professional, and to practice on the highest possible level. So that's what we do at the inn.
And I am a member, as you are, and the board of directors, but those pioneers who founded the Frank Mary Inn of Court, I wonder if you want to send them a thank you or if you want to mention who they were.
Well, I do know that Judge Peter Laureate, who was one of the founders, was actually a clerk for Judge Murray. So he should certainly get that recognition. Judge Laureate has also spent essentially most of his professional life on the Superior Court in Massachusetts, and he'll be retiring fairly soon as well.
Thank you, Mitch. Now, what is the role of an inn of court, in particular the one you're familiar with, if there is a lawsuit?
Well, what we have in the United States is an adversarial system. That is, we make a joke that the judges who hear a case have to find the truth out of 2 half-truths. More realistically, we as lawyers advance the best case we can for our clients. And what clients sometimes think is that the best thing to do to fight their case is to fight hammer and tongs, no quarter, Rambo litigation. In fact, that's not really in the best interests of clients almost all the time. The best interest of clients is to find the goal, right, that the client wants to find and figure out how to get there. Sometimes Rambo litigation may be the only way, but far more often, communication between lawyers advances the cause of the client. And that's one of the things that the inn so vigorously tries to promote. I learned that lesson many, many years ago, the very first time that I ever second-chaired, that is assisted, a more senior lawyer in court. We tried a case in the federal court before Judge Walter Garrity, who was an outstanding judge. We fought very hard. The lawyer on the other side was also very competent. And at the end of the case, Judge Garrity said, if you lawyers will sit for a half an hour, I'm going to go out, figure out my decision, I'll come back and deliver it. And he came back and gave the other side a 100% win.
Oh.
Right? We had a total loss. And I, being a young lawyer, not a year out of law school, was devastated. And I wanted to gather up my books and get out of the courtroom and sulk. And the more senior lawyer said to me, no, that's not the way it's done. And he went over to the lawyer who was the victor. He shook his hand. He congratulated him on a very nice job, said he would be in touch. The next day called, took the lawyer out for a cup of coffee, and was able to settle the case by saying, you got this as a judgment, you know there are some grounds to appeal. How about if we pay you, instead of X, we'll pay you Y, right, and waive the appeal. That result, which was very much in the interest of both clients, could not have been done if the more senior lawyer had been as petulant or as sulky as I was ready to be as a young lawyer. And that's what the inns try to promote. I've had cases with members of the inn on the other side, and I think I can say that without exception, those cases have turned out better for each of our clients than it would have been if we had simply slugged it out in the court. Litigation is extremely expensive. It can be very unpleasant for clients, and what clients have to understand is that when the lawyers talk to each other, and they're civil to each other, and they communicate, they're not being disloyal to their clients. Our loyalty to our clients is not shown by being rude to another lawyer. Our loyalty to our clients is shown by advancing the client's cause. And that's what the Inns of Court try to promote.
Very interesting. On that vein, tell us about, we'll note the founding members of the Inn of Court. There are other members and there are other Inns of Court depending on the area of practice.
That's right. We in Boston are very lucky. We actually have 4 Inns of Court. The Frank J. Murray Inn of Court, the one that you and I are both active in, I've described their activities, and we're an inn of about 80 lawyers and judges, very active. Of, I think, comparable size is a second Inn of Court of general application called the Boston Inn of Court that's also been around since the early 1990s, I believe. And they are very active as well. They do more role-playing in their meetings. Instead of having a presentation the way I've described for the Murray Inn of Court, they actually have what one could call skits or plays working on a particular issue, dealing with a particular trial. And I understand that the members are extremely enthusiastic about the way that they run their inn. There are also at least 2 that I know of, specialized Inns of Court. There's one for family law, that is probate and family law, divorce, probate law, that sort of law. That's also a very active inn and very, I think, very well thought of, and an inn for intellectual property lawyers, the lawyers who, when they go to court, when they have intellectual property litigation, that's sort of the most difficult, the most time-consuming, and the most expensive for the client type of litigation. So whatever can be done in that field to promote discussion, settlement, mediation, communication must be a real benefit to them.
Today, we are learning about the civility and the way of practice among attorneys by their membership on the Frank Murray Inn of Court and the different other Inns of Court available in Boston. Our guest is attorney Mitch Ross, a partner at the prestigious Boston law firm of Sweeter and Ross. Attorney Ross, so tell us, how has the Frank Murray Inn of Court helped you in your practice?
Well, I think it's helped in any number of ways. Certainly the level of communication among lawyers, I've already talked about a little bit. That has come up in a number of cases. It is of a help, and the ability to understand judges a little better. We meet in a very informal situation, and contrary to certain TV shows, we don't talk and would never think of talking about specific cases. If I have a case before a judge, it would be a terrible breach of not just etiquette, but of the rules of professional conduct by which we all live to refer to that case at all. That would be what we call an ex parte communication. However, when you sit in a discussion and the judges are free to participate in it, you get a better understanding about how they think about cases. Not just that individual judge, but judges in general. And I've learned an enormous amount about the thought processes that judges go through to decide cases by simply listening to them talk about different topics. And that's been an enormous help to me in my practice. I do almost all civil litigation dealing with business issues. I do a lot of cases dealing with real estate or financial institutions, and they're usually fairly complex cases. And the more I can understand about how a judge looks at a case, instead of my looking at the case only as an advocate, the better I can serve my clients.
Well, we learned that Inns are beneficial in promoting collegiality. Is this happening across the United States?
Yes, there are hundreds of these organizations, and I think they're really growing. We take special pride in trying to attract young lawyers like yourself. By the nature of things, an inn of court is apt to attract more experienced lawyers. But one of the most fulfilling things that we do within the inn of court is that informal mentoring.
Okay.
Letting the younger lawyers understand the way we more seasoned, if you will, lawyers look at a case and think about a case. And I can see the younger lawyers in our inn soaking up the kind of questions that are asked of judges by the older lawyers, the way that the judges and lawyers interact. One of the problems with our profession is that legal services are so expensive. When I started practice, my hourly rate was $25 an hour, and I thought that was all the money in the world. But nowadays, lawyers are charging hundreds of dollars an hour. What that means is that no one can afford to train young lawyers the way that we were trained back, in the dark ages. For 3 years, I never sent anything out of the office, no letter, even a form letter, without my mentor, a wonderful older lawyer named Tom Paxman, reading every single document that I generated. No one can afford to do that anymore. So the Inns of Court help some in that I think that young lawyers feel far more comfortable if they're on their own or if they're in a group of young lawyers trying to form a practice, talking to the older lawyers in the inn and getting whatever benefit of our experience we can give them.
Well, it was very interesting and very helpful for our audience and for me to learn about all the different Inns of Court. We have no more time to discuss the topic, but to our audience, this episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. And again, my name is Lucy Rivera. I'm the host today, and attorney Mitch Ross was our guest today to talk about the American Inns of Court, and particularly the Frank Mary Inn of Court. Thank you for watching.